Planning Commission, it's 6 o'clock. We're going to call to order the Brainerd Planning Commission meeting for June 16, 2021. And with that, Director Chansky, could you do roll call, please?
Absolutely. Erickson, Foley, Calrus.
Here.
Woodward.
Here.
Yeager.
Yes.
Gorham.
Yes.
And Duval.
Here, thank you. So with that, is there a member who would like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight?
Kevin would.
I will.
He always does. Thank you.
I was volunteered. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it
stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Let the minutes show that Commissioner Erickson is present. Welcome, Tan.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I'm looking for approval, a motion to approve or amend the minutes, or the agenda, excuse me. Let's back up to the agenda, item number 4.
So move, Yeager.
Yeager, is there a second?
Second.
All right, second Gorham, any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, we've got an agenda that's approved. Moving on now to the minutes. We will start with the minutes of our regular meeting held on May 19th. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Or a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Erickson, second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, that's approved. Can we move on to item 2, special meeting, the minutes for the special meeting held on May 26, 2021. Looking for a motion to approve those minutes.
So move.
Erickson, second?
Second. Woodward.
All right, second. Is there any discussion on that? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right. So now, old business. We have item 6A, Sober Homes Update. Director Chansky, could you introduce that topic for us, please?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. So on your meeting on May 19th, the commission had a discussion regarding the issue of sober home regulations. I don't think we need to go into all the background on that. After that meeting, some of the questions that came out of that meeting were 3 questions. One, can the city regulate parking for sober homes? Can the city implement proximity regulations for sober homes? And if so, what such regulations would be appropriate? And 3, how are sober homes different than residential care facilities and boarding houses when it comes to regulating them? After that discussion, Council President Bevins, who was present for that discussion, directed staff to bring that to the city council, for the city council to discuss, and then to be able to give some more direction to the planning commission, to staff on how to address the issue moving forward. And they held a discussion on the issue during their meeting on June 7th. During that meeting, the council motioned to send the issue back to the planning commission, and also directed the city attorney to work with the planning commission to identify what the city can regulate regarding sober homes, and requested that the planning commission, upon working with the city attorney, issue a recommendation back to the city council. So at this point, I think where we're at is the city attorney is going to be diving into the issue in more depth, looking at whether city, especially St. Paul, who's kind of been on the forefront of this issue, is doing, and then coming back to the planning commission. I think the plan is in July. And at that time, we'll have a more in-depth discussion with him. He'll be present here for that meeting and kind of discuss what options may be available to the city, and then what the planning commission thinks would be appropriate regulations to put in place for Brainerd regarding sober homes. And then the commission would then send a recommendation back to the city council to consider. So just want to give you that update, and then also kind of give you the opportunity at this time, as the city attorney begins to dive into this issue in preparation for July. If there are any other comments, questions, concerns you would like the city attorney to look into in preparation for a month from now, in addition to these 3 questions that were raised back in May.
Thank you, Director Chansky. So, questions of staff on the city council recommendations and task of the planning commission, or any questions of clarification? Ms. Woodward?
Along with the questions, just to be a little more specific, I'm also wondering, are we able to put extra restrictions on a resident in a facility as they are still a resident in a home in the city of Brainerd? That just because it's licensed as a facility, if they're looking at putting extra restrictions on a resident because they're a resident of a facility instead of a resident of an apartment.
Clarify that a
Okay,
little bit.
vehicle ownership, because is there a difference between vehicles owned by a resident versus vehicles for the employees of a facility? For where they would be required to park, that sort of thing. It all falls under the same questions.
So, are you thinking along the lines of, so you're talking maybe staff or folks that may provide support of some?
Would there be a difference when they're looking at, can they regulate the parking, proximity regulations, and how are sober homes different than residential care facilities and boarding houses when it comes to regulating them? It's my understanding boarding houses and rental units are, they're residents of the city. And if we're looking at like parking complaints and they don't want the residents to be able to park on a street, but if they were renting or in any other capacity, they would have full rights to park on the street just like anybody else who lives in any of our neighborhoods. So if it sounds to me like it keeps coming down to more of, which is a question for the attorney, but it comes down to, can we regulate what the residents are doing? I'm trying to wrap my head around it. It just doesn't make sense to add more regulations on top of the already in place sober home regulations. So I'm trying to make sense of it, but.
Okay. David, do you have enough of a thread there to formulate a question to the city's attorney? And at this point, we do not have specific sober home regulations in the city ordinance, so we're working with the rental
With the property rental code, correct?
license restrictions and such that apply to all rental homes or multi-unit facilities. Okay. Any other questions of clarification or points of consideration that we would want Director Chansky to bring to City Council for our July, to prepare for our July meeting? And David, I think, is it your expectation that the city attorney would have responses developed in part of our packet going into the July meeting, or?
Yes, that would be my anticipation with that. I'd have him put together something of some of his findings so that you could then review them, and then he go in more in depth in presenting them and kind of where they come from and how they would interact or relate to the city of Brainerd specifically for that full discussion in July.
I think it would be valuable to have a primer on the Federal Fair Housing Act as it relates to this topic, because I think that's a hinge point that creates points of misunderstanding or points of confusion about where the city's authority to regulate certain parts of our residential community gets a little confounded here. And if the minutes can reflect that Commissioner Foley has joined us, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions that we would want to have researched and brought back to us for our July meeting on this topic, our anticipated July meeting?
Mr. Chair, I don't know,
Erickson?
I guess, I have to say, because like density came up so much at that meeting. So I don't know if, we talk about parking, talk about proximity, and then kind of that more general, what are the differences between these two types of housing? So I guess, and it kind of gets to your question, because I know the Federal Fair Housing Act addresses density and says, we can't regulate unreasonably. So perhaps it's couched within what you brought up, but, because I was going to say kind of something more generally, just, what are our parameters? What could we look at? What's fair play to regulate, if that's the route we want to go? Just so we have the parameters. But I guess density, I'm mentioning it because density came up so much at that meeting. And maybe it's couched in what you'd said, but
I think it's.
I'll add that to it.
Thank you, Mr. Erickson. I think it's fair to call it specifically to make sure that it's not something that we end up having to come back to due to omission. So let's, things on the table to make sure, whether it's embedded here or not, that we address that.
And then, Mr. Chair, one thing I just added to my own list that you and I had discussed previously too is for the attorney to address requesting a reasonable accommodation. Should that be something that the city should be doing, having them fill out some kind of form? I know it's called out in the FFHA, so that kind of goes in with that discussion as well, but I think it'd be good to have that specifically called out as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that process kind of a question. So as part of that FFHA, the Federal Fair Housing Act, what are the process steps that would be behind some sort of a reasonable accommodation, granting a reasonable accommodation or modification? Thank you. Anything else that comes to mind or doubts? I think this is our opportunity to make sure that we do our due diligence in the task that we've been given by City Council and be able to come back with a recommendation based on that findings of fact through the city attorney and our own independent work. Anything else? I'm not hearing anything. David, if it is a recommendation of this group to make some sort of a change or addition to ordinance, what does that process look like? So we have a discussion on July, whatever date our next meeting is. That is then heard by the city council the following Monday. They have.
Yeah, so I think it all depends on, there's a couple different ways this can go of how ordinances get adopted or amended. This could be that on, let's see, the planning commission meeting in July is the 21st. So it could be on the 21st where, at that point, I don't think we'd be quite ready to hold a public hearing or anything on language because we haven't had you're just really talking about it, where you could come to some consensus on what you think would be reasonable and then either hold that and conduct your own public hearing on that information, on those recommendations on the 18th of August, which is your meeting in August, before sending it, and then you actually have a recommended, here's some ordinances, and the council can move forward from there. Or the other option would be take your recommendations, send them immediately to the city council, which they would consider it on August 2nd for them to consider it, and then they could send it back to the planning commission on the 18th for you to then go through the regular ordinance adoption process. I think that would be good, at least that way if they have some changes, questions, or concerns, they can be addressed before the planning commission starts the formal process of recommending and adopting ordinance language. So that's what I would recommend is, in July, on the July 21st, we have the discussion with the city attorney, draft some recommended proposals, send those to the planning, immediately to the city council to bounce off them. They feel like you're in the right direction, and then come back on August 18th to actually start the formal adoption process of those recommendations with a public hearing and such.
And after that public hearing, the outcome, assuming that the planning commission gets everything right and no adjustments are necessary, that goes to city council.
That would go back to city council to do the ordinance adoption process, which would be two
readings,
Two
right?
readings, correct. So, in that, pretty much any way you go with that, in that timetable, you'd be looking at, should there be no hiccups or anything along the way, you would be looking at adoption of those recommendations on, looks probably September 20th would be their second meeting in September.
And we're presuming that it's immediately adoptable.
Yep.
Where I'm going with the line of questioning here is whether it would be prudent for the city to consider a moratorium while it works diligently through a timeline like this, and gets itself organized in a timely fashion. And so I don't know if that's a question for Joe, or what, it'd be my suspicion that the city has the ability to be able to implement a moratorium, and whether that makes sense, given that you're 60 days out on a favorable timeline, and whether something like a 90-day moratorium would make sense. While the commission does due diligence without being under pressure to try and get something together that addresses something that's an emerging issue that we're not.
And that's something that the city can absolutely do. Normally, those kind of moratoriums are allowed. It would be, they have to be adopted by resolution. I'd run it by, obviously, by the city attorney, because I know there's state statute, there are some restrictions on how long those moratoriums and such can be in place. That would go before, the council actually meets this upcoming Monday. I don't think we'd have quite enough time to get that vetted and all put together prior to that meeting. So we'd be looking at that going before such a moratorium, if the planning commission decides they want to go that, recommend that route, would be probably going before the council on July 6th. Just for the time to have to be able to put that product together.
Mr. Gorham?
Mr. Chair, my only question is, since we really don't have a definition of a sober house in the rules, right, we don't have it in our ordinance, how could we single out people coming in for sober houses? Aren't they just coming in as regular rental property? So how could we distinguish them? I'm not against the idea, I'm just trying to figure out how we could distinguish them.
Yeah, and I would put that question to staff.
Can we, yeah.
And to Commissioner Gorham's point, I think that's a valuable point, in that right now, because we don't have a definition, because we don't require, we don't have an application for reasonable accommodation or anything that requires them to label themselves as such. I think in a way we know that that's how they're operating, but there's nothing that actually labels them as, that the city identifies them as a sober house. So I could see how that could be a little bit of a hiccup, where we have nothing that says, these are all the sober house applications we've received, so therefore, if we get one of those, we're not issuing it for the next 60 days.
Right.
That is a little bit of a tricky hiccup, how we would determine that, someone's a sober house. There's ways we could get around that by looking at, again, going back to who is living in the house. If it's how we issue it right now is just a single-family residential rental license, but we all know that, our staff know that there's more than 4 unrelated people living in a house. But then there's still that tricky legal of well, are they truly a sober house, and can we, at the time of issuing, that someone applies for a rental license, say, yeah, we're not issuing this rental license for 60, 90 days because we believe you're a sober house? It's kind of I would say, legal gray area, because they haven't specifically identified themselves as a sober house at that time, potentially.
Well, that's a very good question, Mr. Gorham. Being in the realm of the rental license, and at least that's how you're currently regulating them, that could be the avenue by which you simply identify that, during this period of time, deviations from before or whatever, it will not be granted.
With that being said, what someone could do is just open up a sober house and limit it to 4, and they would still be opening. But I think, in that situation, I think part of what has been discussed by the planning commission, I think the city council too, is the issue isn't that a house has 4 people in it, it's the issue that a house has 10, 11, 12 people in it. So at that point, are we so concerned that someone has 4 unrelated people in a house, depending on the size of the structure? But
I think it cues back to the number of occupants question. That's the thread that spins these questions off about parking and not necessarily the proximity, but the other aspects of residential care facilities and boarding houses that we have in our code.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Erickson.
given that the Federal Fair Housing Act does address sober homes, I think it addresses the regulation of sober homes. I think we should maybe kick the moratorium question, add that to our list of questions for the attorney. It does talk about unreasonably regulating sober homes. So would that potentially fit that definition? Because again, we'd be basically singling out a use.
Thank you, Mr. Erickson. I did hear Director Chansky say that, the city does have that authority, though, to be able to issue moratorium on particular uses or things to that effect, the broader things that the city regulates. So that reasonable, that timeline piece is probably the important variable there, that you're not unreasonably and indefinitely putting off consideration of sober houses or a particular use. You're doing it more in the fashion of within a period of time, you will render some decision as to what you're going to regulate or whether you're going to regulate.
Yeah, and such a moratorium also would not say any operating sober house has to cease operating. It's just that we would not license any new ones. I think the biggest picture goes back to what Commissioner Gorham mentioned, and is how are we identifying a sober house, because our ordinance doesn't have a definition for sober house, or we don't have, when someone applies for a rental license, we don't say like check the box for sober house. So how would we fairly identify a sober house and say, because we have identified you as a sober house, therefore we are not issuing you a rental license? That for me is the bigger picture of how does the city do that in a reasonable manner where we're not overly discriminating based off of making assumptions versus them actually having identified themselves as a sober house.
So, yes, Mr. Yeager, please.
If they're currently not identified as a sober house, then is the whole FFA, or is the whole Fairness Act even in application in the adverse, right? So you have the opposite thing going on here as well.
And that's something I've actually discussed with Jennifer Haskamp, was that element of if they're not having either identified or actually have some licensure. And I know the state has recently, last month, kind of changed how it's licensing facilities like these. But if they don't have some kind of licensure, that they might, at that point, they might not even, if they're just saying I'm a sober house and I don't allow alcohol on the premises, that doesn't actually give them the protections of the FFHA.
And that's where I'm going with this is, do they even meet the qualifications to then be able to reach the protections of the Fairness Act? So, in adverse, opposite. So, another good question.
So it'd be my sense that we have an existing process for being able to craft a resolution declaring a moratorium. So that part of the of process steps is probably already in place. So this is really rendering down to just the nuance of language. How you would identify the target of the moratorium, what you're trying to, what aspect of that you're saying is not, is going to be temporarily halted while the city does its due diligence on doing a regulation review.
And if this is, Mr. Chair, if the commission does feel like this is the route you want to go down tonight, that also could be something we'd kick to the city attorney again. Anything recommendation like this when drafting that resolution would be run through the city attorney. So I could work with him to figure out, okay, here's our situation, what is the correct language that should be used?
Do you think you could have that conversation prior to the July 6th meeting? Maybe you're really talking about 2 working days of time here.
So I don't think I could have it before the the June 21st, so this upcoming Monday, as the city council packet goes out tomorrow. But absolutely, we could have it on the July 6th agenda, absolutely. For council consideration. But I would say that would require a affirmative motion from the commission if you wanted to go down that route.
And so could I maybe just get down the line, just a comment from folks on whether you feel there's an interest or a need to do a moratorium to start this process. Can I start on my left, Ms.
I'm
Ferguson?
inclined to say no. The moratorium, I feel like we're singling out a use, and I know that we're trying to get our hands around how to potentially regulate this. My first thought was we're going through a zoning ordinance update. Not to take it to the extreme, but what to extent would we put a moratorium on everything? Obviously, that's an extreme example, but, and again, I also heard staff say it's kind of a legal gray area too, so again, without having some information from the attorney, I guess I wouldn't, at this point, support that.
Mr. Foley, do you have thoughts on that you care to share?
I guess getting up to speed here, I kind of agree with Tad, and I don't know if it makes it hard without there being a definition for the use of a sober home to tackle the issue, I feel like.
Thank you. Ms. Woodward, do you have thoughts?
I'm inclined to say no. And if I can add, Mr. Jansky, Mr. Chair, under our rental housing code, what does this currently fall under rehabilitation center and definitions?
I'd have to look into that. In this situation, how it's just been treated is we treat them as single-family residential rentals. And then where our code talks about not allowing more than 4 people, unrelated 4 people in a home, that part gets overruled by the FFHA. So that's kind of how the city's been dealing with these right now, is we treat them as single-family rental. They have to comply with all the regulations of single-family rentals from, having smoke detectors and all the life safety things and size of bedrooms and all that. And then they're just exempt from the restriction of no more than 4 unrelated people.
Mr. Foley, do you have follow-up?
Yeah, so, sorry if I was late here and I wasn't at the last meeting where this was discussed, but, so right now they have some federal protection that allows them to have more than 4 people?
Correct.
Okay. That, and was there a question whether or not they qualify for that, or we're gonna?
I think the discussion on that is kind of brought up that the chair and I have had discussions on is in the FFHA, there is language regarding requesting reasonable accommodation. That's one of the questions we're going to ask the attorney is, so the FFHA says they are exempt from any restrictions regarding the composition, so any like familial composition, so having no more than 4 unrelated people. However, there's questions of should they be requesting reasonable accommodation from the city before they have that protection. That's one of the things that we're going to be asking the city attorney. And then maybe that's something that the city puts into place down the road is, okay, if you're going to be a sober home, you're going to have more than 4 unrelated people, you need to be requesting reasonable accommodation from the city, and there's a process for that. So that'd be one of the things we'll be looking for the city attorney to answer that question.
Okay, well, I guess I would be curious what the answer is, because it certainly can, explained that way, I think it, could really change the character of a, low-density neighborhood, especially if it starts to compound more than 1, 2, 3 in a couple blocks area. So maybe I'd change my mind, and maybe there would be a need for a moratorium, depending on what the answers of the city attorney would be to some of these questions.
Thank you, Mr. Foley.
Yeah.
Mr. Calroos, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, right now I'm leaning no, but as Commissioner Foley brought up, with him, I was also absent at the last meeting, so I'm trying to get caught up, and some of the comments he just brought up kind of stirred in my head a little bit, but a lot of what Commissioner Erickson noted earlier, I agreed with much of that, but sober homes I'm not super familiar with, so if some of the questions that we've brought up, I mean, they could change my decision ultimately. But right now I'm leaning no.
Thank you. Mr. Gorham?
I would say no. I just don't think we have, we don't have anything solid to base it upon. I think if you do a moratorium, you have to have solid definitions to work with, and we just don't have that yet. We will have it when we finish the process, but not yet.
Thank you, Mr. Gorham. Mr. Yeager?
Exact same position. I just, I can see both sides of this, both for and against, and I can certainly see where there's angles from neighborhoods as well as the people who would like to have these in existence, and I'm just very nervous about executing a decision that would affect either one of those parties without full knowledge of, A, whether these are in fact identifiable sober homes, and exactly what the protections are. So until we have that, or until I can see that, I just feel like I have to say no at this point to putting a moratorium in place. That's where I'm at.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Well, I think the opinion of the commission's pretty clear here. So you know, I do think that well, I recognize that the purpose of a moratorium is to allow the community time to be able to gather facts and make informed decisions, and those decisions may end up being, the decision may be no action. No action is necessary. But I think what I am hearing is sort of an undercurrent here is that I don't understand enough to be able to say whether we should be leaning in on this or not. I don't know enough about, and we have a list of questions that we need clarification on from the city attorney. I think staff are equally struggling to say, how do we use the pieces of our ordinances and the overlay of this Federal Fair Housing Act in a way that allows us to be able to fairly regulate a use in our communities, and at the same time be able to be consistent with our residential districts and be consistent with our comp plan and all those pieces in play. And so to me, the purpose of the moratorium is to buy yourself time to get informed, make some decisions within a reasonable timeline, in order to then be able to then say, okay, we think we know what we need to do, and we may need to do nothing, that we're perfectly prepared in the current construct of our ordinance to not have to do anything. It works exactly how we have organically gone here to say that it's a regulated use under our rental housing code. We're done. So I would make that point, and I think that the struggles of the definitions and things, it just comes up that, to me, it shows the weaknesses in our ordinance. And so this may be a timing where you say, at what point do I have enough understanding to say, is this a big enough issue that we want to say, whoa? But, you know, a lot can happen in the timeline that we laid out here that may play the city's hand with the issues and the questions that we've already laid out in front of us here. And you know, at that point, it's difficult to be able to go backwards, to be able to say, boy, if we had that knowledge at this point in time on June 16th, I would have been in a better position here, or the city would have been in a better position. So, so with that, I think we'll let that issue close at this point in time. So, any other questions, comments, or considerations on the old business sober homes update? Hearing none, let's move on to new business. Our new business for the night is 805 Laurel Project presentation. David, could you set that up for us, please?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Skip DeShano, who's the president of D.W. Jones Incorporated, is here this evening to present a concept proposal for a new development to be located in the former Thrifty White location. I'll let him go through the details, so I won't steal that thunder from him. Just a few things that I did want to point out for tonight. One, I think we as staff are very excited to see this finally coming to this project coming to this level, especially I know City Administrator Jennifer Bergman, who I think has been a thorn in Skip's side for the last 4 or 5 years since her days at the HRA, trying to get a project like this off the ground. So we're excited to finally be at this kind of a stage. Again, this is what we're looking for tonight. This is a very high-level concept review. As Skip will go through in a little bit here, I think what they're really looking for is to get some initial reactions, questions from the commission tonight, and then looking for, at the end of our conversation tonight, kind of a motion to support this type of project, this development, as they move forward, pursuing financing and things for this project that we'll probably more likely see coming back to the commission in 2022 for actual formal review of the project itself. So again, if you have any questions about different aspects of this, I encourage you to ask Skip and he can explain. But again, just kind of would encourage you to refrain from getting into the nitty gritty about things, like facade and things like that. Those are things those questions will be answered, but I think later on as we get down the process of this development coming to light. So with that, Mr. Chair, if there's any questions right off the bat from myself from the commission, I think I would encourage you to turn it over to Mr. DeShano and he can go through his project. And Steph, can you make sure that mic's on? I forgot to check if it was on.
Questions of staff on the proposal that we're about to hear? I do have one question, David. As far as a motion of support, I'm not sure how we do that. Seems to me that would be something that city council would want to do for purposes of what I'm hearing here for being able to
So
leverage.
I think from what we're looking for the planning commission tonight, again, is we'll be going before the council on Monday. They'll be before the council on Monday is really looking for they'll be considering a resolution to support this project and specifically supporting doing some financial assistance. So things like TIF and stuff like that. I think what we're looking for the commission tonight is support of the general project and support of you think, yes, this is a project that you believe fits the intent and purpose of the area and the location and serves, it kind of meets what we've been looking for, what's outlined in the comprehensive plan, and that there would be there's no initial red flags to this development that you would say, no, this is not a good spot for this development. No, if this were to come before us, we would have great concerns with that. So that's the kind of general motion of support.
Yeah, okay. And to me, I think if we could assemble as an outcome of this, sort of the findings of fact that would be, that could be used by city council to support their resolution of support, I think that would be a process way to go here. Since we're not elected officials, I don't know that we can really, or we should be doing that formal thing from the city that says we support this. But I get at the intent, and knowing that Monday the council is going to hear this, we should maybe come away with being able to itemize those findings of fact that the council can use in that resolution, if that is
And that's
reasonable.
exactly what I think we're looking for. That's a good point. Yeah, yes, the council will be actually adopting a formal resolution in support of this project. I think we're looking for tonight is really to show the council that yes, you as the planning commission are also in support of this project, which is just again to support their potential motion and consideration of this project.
Very good. Okay, well, at this point, Mr. DeShano, right? Sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We might be a little rusty. This is the first in-person meeting we've had, I think, in 2 years. So the days of the Zoom are fading away, at least for this aspect of projects. But yes, I'm Skip DeShano, as David had presented, President of DW Jones. Andrew DeShano is here also. I'm going to give a little general information about the project and our concept and a little bit about our financing and funding that we're proposing to do. And Andrew's going to go into a little more detail about the building itself and the construction side of things. Just to give you a little info about us, we've worked all over northern Minnesota. We live in Walker. We've never actually done a project in Brainerd. So it's the first time we've ever stepped foot in this building even. So so I just thought I'd just tell you a little bit. We've owned and developed about 1,700 units in 32 different communities in northern Minnesota. We pretty much stay north of St. Cloud. I mean, we like northern Minnesota. We live here, and that's kind of our niche. And we also have a management company, which you might be more familiar with, DW Jones Management. We manage 9 properties here in the Brainerd-Baxter area for SV managers for other entities, some of which are the HRA. And our management company manages about 130 buildings, about 3,500 units from the northern rings of the Twin Cities with some market rate projects up to all the borders. So we are a Greater Minnesota housing company. I mean, we like Greater Minnesota, and that's where we work. But the 805 Laurel project, as David had said, has been something that Jennifer Bergman has been meeting with Andrew and I for several years about doing something downtown. We need some housing downtown. The city wants some housing downtown. And she first presented the Thrifty White property to us maybe 2 years ago. We looked at it, stars just didn't line up. The price was way up here. There's no way that we'd be able to do an affordable housing project with that. Prices come down as the current owner's lease has ticked away, and it is going to expire here in 2022. And the timing of when we potentially could close and his lease expires matches up, so you're not paying this premium for a lease that we don't need. Our intent is to tear the building down and start completely over. We are looking to apply to Minnesota Housing Finance through their RFP program. The applications are due July 15th, and so that's what we're gaining, some different pieces of the puzzle to submit the best application we can for funding. It's highly competitive. On average, there's 4 to 5 applications per project that get awarded a year, and so you have to be on your game to get awarded. This particular project, located downtown, it scores points very well, and we feel really good that it has a great chance of getting funding because of that. It's all about points. It can be the greatest project in the world, and if you don't have enough points, you don't get funded, it doesn't get built. And so we're coming up with the concept. We've spent some money with an architect to come up with some designs that we can submit, and we're excited about the project. We have not done a downtown project per se. We've done a similar type project without the commercial in Duluth, but we've not done one like this, and so it's a little different, and so that's kind of exciting. It's not the same old just regular apartment building on a 4-acre site. It's a high density in a downtown area. The project will have a range of income restrictions that come with it, anywhere down as low as 30% area median income to as high as 80% area median income. I don't know how familiar you are with tax credits, but that's a new change in the tax credit law that allows us to go up to 80%. Most tax credit projects were limited at 60%, but if you have some lower income units, you can have some higher income units. That's called income averaging. So you can average the incomes in the project and get a little bit higher. If everything goes well, we would be awarded towards the end of December of 2021. It's a long wait once you submit the application. And you don't hear anything. It's quiet. But then, hopefully, we get an award. Then we would work very diligently to come back to you, to the City Council, for all the final approvals, final plans. We'd be doing our due diligence with Minnesota Housing Finance for the underwriting and financing with tax credit syndicators, and would expect to close probably September of 22 and start construction and open August of 2023. So it's a long road before we're actually housing people. Our numbers right now are a little rough. We're estimating the total development costs around $12 million. That number may change a little bit. Our concept is to eventually condo this, in that we need to separate the commercial from the residential. So it's really just condoing it in 2 components. The tax credit syndicators want nothing to do with commercial space. So we would be looking to pull that out and really have 2 owners in this project. We realize that the building, the way we're proposing and with the commercial space, we're going to exceed the allowable height, which is going to require a conditional use permit, because right now I think we're showing a height of just a little over 55 feet. I can't remember what the maximum number is, but I recall we're over that. We would also, as I said, be doing a CIC to split the building into a condo situation from residential to commercial. But we're excited about it. We think it'll be a great project. We don't think we've had a project that'll score this high of points before, so that's what really gets us excited. There's a lot of the boxes that we get to check out. It's in a very walkable neighborhood. It has a good walk score, which we never get. The HRA is working with us to provide some rental assistance in the project, which gives us great amount of points. It's in a qualified census tract, it's in an opportunity zone. There's just a lot of boxes that make this feasible. So with that, I'm gonna let Andrew talk a little bit about the building, and then we'll let you guys ask questions.
Good evening, everyone. So I'll just give you kind of a high-level view of the plans and kind of try and walk you through them. If you guys have any questions as I'm going through them, just feel free to ask them. So this is a site plan, and this shows the first floor commercial. As you can see, we've got up to 5 commercial spots, and in between that, we've got the apartment unit, some amenities. So we've got a community room where the tenants will be able to reserve that spot, and they can rent it out for parties or whatever it might be. There's also a gym that's in there that's free for them, or that's included with the rent, along with the lobby. For the on-street parking, or the on-site parking, there's 33 surface stalls. And then you can see on the east side there's a ramp to go down to an underground garage, which has 37 stalls. So there'll be one for each unit. So on the top there, that's the parking garage. We do have a spot for a bike rack. There's the elevator in there. And it will be the one stall will be included in the rent for the tenants. And then I guess below that, again, is the commercial space. If you go one more. So this is the second, third, and fourth floor. So this building is a mix of studios to 3-bedroom units. In each floor, all the units are stacked on top of each other. We've got 3 studios, 6 1-bedrooms, 18 2, and 9 3-bedroom units. And the 3-bedroom units have in-unit washers and dryers. The rest of them will have a laundry facility at each floor that they can use. These units they'll have a full set of appliances. They're good size units. And you can see they've got the patios off to the, for each of them. I think, go one more. So this is the rough concept for the elevation of the building. The first floor, you can see the commercial, that's gonna be all brick. So that first floor will be 15 feet, and that's all precast concrete. Then above that, it's all gonna be stick built, and it's gonna be a mix of materials from horizontal steel siding, corrugated steel, and then we've also got those flat panels are gonna be a hardy board or possibly a flat steel product of some sort. And you can see the decks. As far as the mechanical stuff inside the units, so it will be hot water baseboard heat and then through wall ACs. Each of the units has a full range of the appliances, dishwashers, all those kind of fun stuff. So I think that was a little quick, but is there any initial questions that I can answer for you guys?
Questions for Andrew or for Skip on the proposal?
I have one question. I think I remember another Thrifty White somewhere up north being demoed and built out into apartments. Was that you guys as well? Or not?
No.
Okay.
No.
Other comments or questions?
I have a
Mr.
question.
Loram?
Was a little confused on the 30 to 80%, and you're using jargon that's certainly part of your business. But help me understand. Are we talking people earning 15,000, 30,000? Just a rough idea?
Yep. I can tell you exactly, actually.
Sure. Thanks.
So with our concept, and partly for points. We anticipate having 4 units designated for high-priority homeless, singles only. And Lutheran Social Services would be a service provider that would be paid to help those 4 residents. That's where the 4 units that would be at 30% AMI. So 30% AMI for a single person, since that's what we're earmarking it for, is the current one is 15,660. And then we would have a program called Housing Supports that would cover their rent and utilities, and also provides money to Lutheran Social Services to provide those services. So to give you some, so there's only 4 of those. There's also only 4 80% too. And an 80% household, let's say a family of 4 is 59,600. Family of 3 is 53,680. I can give you lots of numbers, but that gives you the ballpark.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Right. And there's probably the bulk of the units are in the 60% area median income, which for that family of 4 is 52,150.
That helps. Thank you.
And one piece about the tax credit program that's different than other types of subsidized housing is that it's a threshold income. You need to meet that income when you move into the building. You can better yourself, make more money down the road, not the next day. But I think it needs to be 6 months. I think is technically at least 6 months. You can go over that limit. You never get kicked out of the unit, and nor does your rent go up, unless of course you have a voucher from Eric over here.
Right.
So people can better themselves. They can save money, buy a house. It's common that we have people in tax credit housing that eventually become homeowners because got a 2-family household. Pretty soon they're making $70,000, $80,000, and they've got a fairly affordable rent.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Sure.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Yeager?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quickly, and I'm really nervous to fall into the nitty-gritty term here, so I'm going to I want to just try and navigate that razor's edge. But is there any
Have a
long?
stick, don't worry.
Okay. Is there any? I'm just wondering about any long-term subsidizing that would be required by the city of Brainerd for either the building itself, the grounds, anything. Is there a long-term subsidy required from the city of Brainerd for a project like this?
The tax increment financing would be the only thing.
Okay. Gotcha.
And we need that tax increment financing to show, support that the city is interested in investing a piece of into the project.
Right.
Otherwise, the state, well, if they're not going to put anything in, why should we put $8 million in, or whatever the number is? And that's also part of our points.
Understood.
We need to leverage local support.
All right. Thank you. That's all.
And then on that, and I guess I'm going to put you on the spot there, Eric, is with that, because I think the intention is to request that it be an HRA housing TIF district. That TIF district actually only covers the residential piece, will not cover the commercial piece, correct?
Right, so that's where we're still in negotiation between the HRA and the city, deciding who's gonna hold the TIF district, if it is gonna be HRA, because there was that question of the commercial space can only be up to 20%.
20%.
And so.
This is about 17, I think.
Yeah, and so we're still negotiating with that. I think I can speak for our agency. We want to make sure that this is successful. I think the city wants to make sure that this is a successful redevelopment of a kind of a blighted property. So one way or the other, I think we're in unison in wanting to see a TIF district. Whoever ends up doing it, I think we'll get it done either way. But yes, still some of that question with the commercial space. But if it's a 17%, we would be able to do that. So we're working with the beginning portions of working with the TIF folks to get those wheels in motion.
We currently have a site office in Baxter, and we intend to be one of the tenants in this building to move our site office from Baxter into this. So,
Mr. Chair, and you'll take over as property manager of it once it's built?
Yes, we would manage the residential component. The commercial piece, we've been talking with a person who has local roots to Brainerd, who likes downtown commercial and has experience with it, and we may partner with them, they may take it from us. That's not worked out yet.
It's interesting, mixing the commercial with one of these Minnesota finance deal. That's fairly unique, I believe, isn't it? And
They've done a few, they're definitely leery of them, and that's why we want to break it apart, so they don't have that fear, that risk. The housing is standalone on its own compared to the commercial.
each apartment would not be its own
No.
unit in the CIC, though.
No.
That would be one whole unit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. No, we're not going to condo the apartment units, right?
Other questions or comments?
I'm gonna throw another thing if I can, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Skip, can you go through, so we've talked about the AMI, it might also be helpful for the commission to kind of understand, I know you've run some rough numbers of what rents
Rents
could
would-
look like, then.
Sure.
Because I think part of it has been, as we've been discussing with Skip and Andrew, is really one of the things that we as staff want to hone in on, and Skip will show this as he goes through what rent structure would look like, is that this isn't necessarily low income with subsidized housing, this is workforce housing. You know, we looked at that AMI, these are gonna be people who, you know, they have jobs, they're people who work at Cub, there's teachers at the school district, they're nurses at Essentia. They are gonna be, you can't necessarily live in these units and not be working, so.
That's correct, because except where Eric maybe has a resident that has a voucher in there or somebody that fit into the project-based rental assistance, the rent is the rent, and you have to pay it. So the one-bedroom rents, we are looking at a range from about $690 to $720. Two bedrooms, $780 to $950. Three bedrooms from $900 to a little over $1,000. There's a host of unit sizes, so there's some with different square footages, some that have a den, and that makes it a two-bedroom den, some are two-bedroom, two-bath. So that's why I just gave you a range instead of telling you all of them individually. But that's what we're proposing in the application. We have nailed these down to what we're going to use. And we base them on what is here, what we manage, but we manage a lot of townhomes here, so this is different. This is an apartment. Heat's included, garage is included, so there's some amenities, some nice amenities that are included in rent. So we don't want to empty out our units that we manage by having something to afford, cheaper than what's there, so we want to be competitive.
Thank you. Well, I'm likely to stumble into nitty-gritty.
I see all your notes over there.
I am curious, I may have missed what the surface parking is for. You had the 37 stalls below.
Correct, and 33 surface.
Yeah.
So,
What will that serve? Is that,
well, there could be a household that has more than one vehicle.
right?
So they have a place to park. We have these commercial places, which they need a place to park. It's my understanding we would be like the first downtown project that provided parking, and I think that's a good thing. It's nice that people don't have to move their cars for snow plowing, and they still have to move their cars so we can plow it, but
Right.
you don't. We want to provide parking if we can, and we use a lot of the site by having this building and all this surface parking, but we think it's desirable and it would be necessary. And then there is also street parking all the way around the building too that is striped.
It just seems to me that maybe working with the city to possibly diagonal stripe the parking there would get a lot more for the commercial use on-street parking, and then that could allow you to pull that surface lot down. Maybe there's room for some green space or something there for the tenants, whether it's just a recreation area or whether there's community gardens and things there for your for your tenants to do certain activities and such, but, you know, right now, that looks like it just mimics the footprint that's there, and, you know, and so
Right.
you're not enhancing or adding to the imperviousness or things that are there.
No.
But I wonder if it's an opportunity to think about, you know, maybe softening that site just a little bit, given that you have the majority of the residents would have their parking underneath. So, you know, maybe it's almost like half, you could almost cut that in half as an example, and for the other car in the apartment or the other guest that comes to visit. And
Sure.
so I'd encourage you to think about
Okay.
that, but it's, you know, my drive down Laurel seems to, you know, that you probably could get the diagonal parking in, but that's a city decision, I think. But I might encourage you to you know, discuss that further with them, just as a way to support the businesses with the parking in front. And the off-street parking would then be available mostly to support those residents and any overflow
Sure.
to the businesses. But this is a super idea. It lends a lot of support to my conspiracy to make Brainerd a whistle-free town, to have good residential housing right next to the tracks there. And you'll probably, other than the water tower, you'll have the best view in the town. So I think this is pretty awesome. Any other thoughts or comments?
As long as we're going nitty-gritty,
It hasn't been too nitty-gritty.
Well, Jaeger started it. I just wanted.
No, I think I stayed out of the nitty-gritty.
I haven't thrown my pen yet.
Okay.
there, was there a lot of thought put into the number of spaces by the architect? Did he do a calculation based on our ordinance, or is it just kind of conceptual still?
The
And-
parking spaces?
Yeah,
It was
Just-
more maximizing. I mean, that's where I was pushing him to maximize parking spaces. And we had a previous concept, but we were afraid the ramp to get to the underground garage was gonna be too steep, so we lengthened it so it wasn't as steep, which took out a whole row of parking stalls. But it was my suggestion to maximize. Usually, when we're in a community, it's a 2-to-1 ratio that we're forced to combine, and so this is a lot less. So I start getting nervous, you know. But
no, it's just a mixed-use downtown type thing. It's probably kind of hard to calculate exactly what's needed, but is there an entrance where that ramp is gonna go down right now currently? You can't really see because of the trees, or would that be a brand-new entrance?
off from
Proposing
9th,
Off of Ninth.
I
know.
don't
I
believe
think
there
there's
is
a curb
one.
cut there right now.
Yeah, I don't believe so.
Just curious. I know everything's still real conceptual right now, but
I believe right now, I believe there's actually a cut right on Laurel, I believe.
Yes, I
And
believe
that
you're
cut would
correct.
obviously end up going away and probably being replaced by a cut on Ninth.
There's alley
Yep,
And then alley
in
access.
the,
But
right.
there's I think it's a gated off access right now on Laurel that when the building, because this building will be longer than the existing building, that access will end up going away. So they would essentially just be replacing the cut.
Right, I would agree. You can see the current building ends about where the end of our apartment common space that drops down on the first floor, where it says apartment community room, offices, restrooms, and fitness area. That's about where the Thrifty White ends right now, and I think where we have our vestibule is that curb cut that comes off from Laurel right now. Seems to me it comes pretty close to the building, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
If it's not that, it's the next one, next door over.
All right, well.
But yes, we can look into that and try to create some more green space and reduce some parking.
All right, is there any other questions for Skip or Andrew on their proposal here? All right, well, thank you very much for
You're
your
welcome.
presentation. I
Thank
think
you for
at
your
this
time.
point, what I'd be looking for would be a motion to recommend council approval of a resolution of support. If got that right, based on the preliminary review of, and presentation of their project proposal. Anyone willing to make that motion?
I do have one more quick question,
All
sorry.
right. Mr. Foley?
You said, assuming the financing came back, you'd be looking to close September in 2022. When did you say that you would likely have the decision from the financing? I missed that date.
It's basically the end of the year. It's usually the third Thursday of the month is when Minnesota Housing Finance Board meets, and so in December. They haven't given an exact date, but usually it would be that third Thursday in December. And I usually find out 1 week ahead of time.
Mr. Chair, we'll just also add that D.W. Jones and the current building owner are in agreement on do have a purchase agreement in place
Yes.
that is contingent on some things, but there is a purchase agreement in place.
Yes, financing being one of them
Yeah.
with Minnesota Housing Finance.
Very good, thanks.
You're welcome.
So I am fishing for a motion, and maybe there's a list of findings of facts that maybe we should talk about those before we go to the motion. Mr. Gorham?
Well, I was going to make a motion, and I was going to list some findings of fact. Do you want me to start with that, or do you want to start with the findings of fact?
I think we can, if
Because
you're
basically
open
it
to,
is findings of fact.
if you're open to just
I'm open to amendment.
amending, that's where I'm at. Yep.
Absolutely. So I would be in support, I'd like to make a motion in support of the project based on the following factors. This is an example of infill, to some extent at least, of infill in the city. It is an example of redevelopment and reuse, which we talk about in the comprehensive plan is very important. It is an example of a mixed housing opportunity, which is important. It's an example of creating, adding to a walkable neighborhood. This is people who live in this neighborhood will have great opportunities for shopping, for banking, many different things. So it's part of a walkable neighborhood. It's part of a whole neighborhood. It will help make downtown become more of a whole neighborhood. It has elements of commercial, which is just great as a downtown person. Commercial just feeds other commercial opportunities, and I think this would be great. I think this would be, to some extent, stretching downtown. We've kind of talked about that. Mike Lamb likes to talk about maybe we think our downtown is bigger than it really is. This might make our downtown embiggen it a little bit, right? Which is good, if that's a word. I'm gonna stick with that one. And so I'm going to start with that. That's my starting motion, and I'm open to friendly amendments.
If I may offer an addition here that the proposal does address the housing needs identified in the Crow Wing HRA housing study. So I think in addition to all the very good findings of fact that you've identified. Any other? So we have a motion, and is that motion that, are we recommending the council approve?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Mr. Erickson, second. Thank you. Any discussion now on the motion? All right, hearing none, I think we're ready to go to vote. David, you need time to finish writing.
Nope, I am good, Mr. Chair.
You're good, you're good. All right, with that, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, unanimous vote from the council. So congratulations, and really excited to see this. So, David, next steps for these folks?
Yep, so then we'll see Skip and Andrew on Monday, as they'll be going before the city council for the adoption of the formal resolution in support of this project and supporting, helping them, aiding in some potential public financing of the project as well.
Very good.
Thank you
Thank you
very much. Have a
again.
great night.
And thank you for developing in Brainerd.
You're welcome.
All right, so we are now moving to item 8 on the agenda, the public forum. This is time allotted for citizens to bring matters not on the agenda to the attention of the Planning Commission. Time limits may be imposed, and time limits will certainly be imposed. I don't think anybody's online, is there?
I think just Mike Lamb.
Mike Lamb. So with that, we will open the public forum at 7:15. Does anyone wish to come forward? Hearing and seeing none, then I'm going to close the public forum. And we are now moving on to item 9 on the agenda, the Community Development Director's Report. David.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few things, some updates. Country Manor, their development stage plan of that planned unit development that the commission considered on May 26th was approved by the city council, as well as the first reading of the ordinance rezoning the property from RA to PUD. The second reading or the final reading of that ordinance to rezone the property will be considered by the council on the will be held by the council on the 21st, this upcoming Monday. After they conduct the final reading, they will then vote to adopt that ordinance to rezone that property. Then moving forward will be kind of some next steps. What that looks like is right now I've spoken to Brian Kelm, been in communication with him. What they're doing is they have submitted their plans for bids. So they've gone out to bid. They anticipate bids on that project coming back in early July. That will kind of indicate to them what their, if the project's going to be coming in within their acceptable budget range, especially right now with construction costs. And that will determine kind of their timeline moving forward, whether or not they will be able to move forward and potentially kind of start moving some dirt this fall, or if they'll be kind of waiting and pushing some things into next year. I'm hoping that construction costs come down. If things do come back favorably, the next step will be we as the city will begin working with our legal representations that are drafting a developer's agreement. They will be coming back to the city with some requests, some financial assistance. They will not be asking for TIF, but potentially some others. So they'll be going back to the city council to request if there's any interest in some public assistance from potential tax abatement or permit fee waiving or things like that. That would be a part of that developer's agreement, so that'll probably be in late July, early August. And then once all of that is settled, the developer's agreement is put together, then they would come back with that final stage plan for the commission's approval prior to submitting any permits to begin the construction process. The city council also approved the final plat for the Myra addition to Brainerd Oaks on June 7th. And then they also held the first reading of the amendment to the food truck ordinance on June 7th, and they'll be conducting the second reading of that ordinance this upcoming Monday on the 22nd. Again, after they conduct that reading, they will vote to adopt that ordinance. And then looking forward to next week and the workshop we have planned for Wednesday the 23rd at 6:30 in the fire station. Again, this workshop will be for Jennifer and Mike to present the annotated outline of the zoning code. The intention is to have that annotated outline to you, and I know you're online, Mike, on Friday. On Friday. To have that in your packet so you can at least start reviewing that. And then I know if Mike chooses to make any amendments or changes to that, he'll just tell you what those are on Wednesday. But the idea is to give that in your hands so you can start doing some review, read through that over the weekend or in preparation for Wednesday, so we can kind of hit the ground running on Wednesday as we go through that annotated outline in detail. The intention is then for the city council to be having a workshop on July 12th when that annotated outline with any amendments, changes, recommendations that the commission has to be presented to the city council to get their blessing. Once the city council has blessed the annotated outline, then Jennifer and Mike can dive head on into actual drafting of ordinance language. So that will be happening hopefully on July 12th. And that's all I have for this evening, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, David. Any questions for the director? All right, moving on to commissioner questions and comments, item 10 on the agenda. All right, I can talk a bit. Body language speaks volumes.
Super brief one.
Yes,
Super
Mr.
brief one. In the Minneapolis Tribune on Sunday, And they always have an interesting kind of local section that I look at. It's local statewide. It goes through a lot of state things. Brainerd, our food truck discussion made it. It was noted that we were freeing the food trucks, and I thought that was kind of interesting. And then a couple items down, there was another community, I forget which suburb it was, where a bunch of folks in the neighborhood, they just started saying, what if we all just get a food truck? What if we just haul into food trucks? And so they started bringing in food trucks during COVID, and everybody would get together, and they had a great time. They have a dessert truck that would come and stuff. And now the city's decided perhaps they need to regulate their food trucks. I just thought that was kind of interesting. The two articles were pretty much right next to each other, and they're going to look at regulating these food trucks because, you know, there's potential. It just made me go, ugh. Anyhow, that's all I got.
Thank you. And with that, I guess I'm looking, anyone else? I'm looking for then a motion to adjourn to the workshop on Wednesday the 23rd at the Fire Department Training Room.
So move.
Erickson. Second on that?
Second, Jaeger.
Jaeger, all right, all
I
in favor,
got you.
say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, didn't get a chance. Okay. Thank you very much.